This is Garden Variety, a horticulture podcast from Iowa Public Radio and Iowa State University Extension and Outreach.
I'm Meghan McKinney in for Charity Nebby. Blueberries are packed with nutrients and minerals, and they taste amazing in pancakes. But growing them, though, requires extra attention to detail. Fruit crop specialist with Iowa State University Extension, Randall Vos, is here to show some best practices for growing blueberries. Hello, Randall.
Good morning.
Thanks for being here. Okay, so I'm not seeing a lot of blueberry farms in Iowa. Where in the U.S. can you grow blueberries?
Yeah, so you can grow blueberries in actually a pretty wide range of places as long as you do a few very specific things related to like soil pH and soil acidity. So if you look at where blueberries are native to, there's several species and they're all native to kind of the eastern part of the United States. And one key factor with that is the soils in that area tend to be acidic or low in pH. And so that's the key thing is wherever we're growing them, and in most parts of Iowa we have to think about soil pH.
What are some other challenges when it comes to growing blueberries?
The big thing with blueberries is, it's one of those, you can't do that as an impulse purchase. So you have to kind of plan ahead. And, if you're at the garden center, you want to buy a blueberry. The main thing, like I kind of alluded to, is the fact that you have to make sure soil pH is in line. And if you look at most people's backyards in Iowa, the pH is rarely below 6. And if you look at a lot of soil pHs in people's backyard, it might be in the 7 range. And that's what we consider neutral, and a lot of plants can handle that. And the thing is, the blueberries need a pH between around 4.5 and 5.5. And so you really need to plan a year in advance before planting it to make sure that you have that ideal soil pH, because it takes time to get down there. And so, like I mentioned, it's not an impulse purchase. It's something you have to plan ahead for. There's some other factors too. They don't handle weed pressure very, very well, and also need very even watering, but you can't have them in like waterlogged soils.
Yeah, I want to talk about the soil. I mean, how forgiving let's say you take the leap and commit to a blueberry bush, how forgiving would your blueberry plant be to the wrong acidity level?
Not forgiving at all. They definitely need that soil pH being low, and that's the main thing that holds people back from succeeding in blueberry production. Is what happens if they're planted in too high of a pH. They have all these nutrient deficiencies, and that's something you can address after the fact a little bit, but all in all, they're not forgiving basically. And so, if you don't have the right soil pH, it's not going to go well. They're actually pretty easy to care for if you have the ideal pH, and even watering. They're very easy to prune. It's not complicated to prune them at all. The pest management isn't super challenging either, and so. I guess the main thing out of today, if people are curious about blueberries, make sure your soil pH is in line before planting.
What types of blueberry bushes or varieties should people think about before picking one if they want to take on this commitment of growing blueberries?
So most blueberries that are grown in Iowa are what we call northern high bush. And so the terms are kind of weird. A high bush means it's going to get between 5 and 7 feet tall when it's mature. And it's going to take 5 years to get to that point. And for most of Iowa, that's probably your best choice. There's also a group called low bush blueberries, and those are the ones that are primarily grown in Maine, and they're only about a foot tall, but the yield's pretty low on those. The berries are quite small, so we don't really encourage people to plant those. If you're maybe in the far northeast or maybe far northwest parts of Iowa where it gets a little bit colder, there's also a group called the half highs, and those are a cross between the low bush and high bush. They get maybe 3-4 feet tall, but most of Iowa, the northern high bush are probably the best option for you. But within that group of cultivars, there's a range of cold hardiness. And so probably the most common one you see in a lot of the stores is either Blue Crop or Patriot. And both of those are pretty good varieties. Patriot is not my personal favorite. It maybe has a little bit smaller fruit, and maybe blooms a little earlier in some situations, but it's very adaptable to a lot of Iowa. And both of those are what we call like a early to mid season variety. And the nice thing about blueberries is if you plan your cultivars out right, you can be picking for about 2.5 months from July to about maybe about the middle of September, be pushing it, but early September if you stagger the varieties out. And so we also have some that ripen in August and September. So some varieties like Nelson and Chandler are going to be in that August time range. And then there's varieties like Aurora and Liberty that are late August and early September. And so it's one of those things that if you get a couple different cultivars, you can really enjoy blueberries for, a good 2 months at least.
And across these different cultivars, again, like with the soil, it sounds like they all need similar acidity ranges.
Yeah. There's always some that are a little maybe more or less sensitive. But all in all, again, the big thing is make sure you have that soil acidity right before you plant.
How do you test your soil pH?
Yeah, there's a lot of ways to do it. You can set it into a certified lab that's going to cost you about $20. And I know that's maybe a little people balk at that, but if you look at these blueberry plants are going to be with you for decades, and then you want to do it right, if you're going to invest in them, you can buy kits to check pH too. The key thing, if you're going to check pH at home, either with test strips or if you buy an inexpensive pH meter, you want to use distilled. So you take your soil and you mix it with, you want to make sure you get distilled water, not tap water from your from your house, because tap water, especially like Des Moines publishes their Des Moines Waterworks water data, oftentimes the pH is close to 9 of that tap water, and that's going to kind of skew your soil sample a little bit. So you want to get some distilled water from the grocery store. It's a couple bucks a gallon, maybe a 2-to-1 ratio of distilled water and soil, and that will get you at least very close to checking your pH, either with a pH meter and test strips.
And how do you amend your soil? How often should you be testing your soil, making sure that it's in that correct range if you do have some blueberry plants?
Yeah, so the most important time is before you plant. So let's say you want to plant in 2027, you can check your pH now, apply the products at lower pH, and that would be what's called elemental sulfur. If I looked at what an average rate might be for most of Iowa, if you have 3 foot by 12 foot bed that's going to hold 3 or 4 blueberry pushes, it might only take a couple pounds of that sulfur to get it down to where you want to be. But again, that's going to vary a lot. And then, every 4 years, maybe pH is going to slowly creep back to its starting point. So you're not done after you apply this product and plant your blueberries. You're gonna have to check it in 4 years or so. And so yeah, every 4 years or so, that would be sufficient to kind of check in to see if your pH is still in line.
I'm wondering too, because you said it takes a year or maybe longer to really get a good harvest with these bushes. Let's say someone's tried this and then they're not getting a good harvest. What would you recommend for them to do?
Yeah, that really it takes 5 or 6 years to really get into full production of blueberry, and so it kind of slowly ramps up. And you might be looking at 10, 15 pounds of blueberries, maybe even more, in 5 to 6 years. And so if you're not, seeing great results after a couple of years, I'd probably look into that soil pH thing, because that is critical. Also, again, they don't handle weed control. Like I mentioned, the roots are very shallow. And so just a few weeds or even aggressive lawn right up next to it, you really probably want to mulch around them. So that might be something to consider. And, Iowa's been pretty dry the last couple of years, and blueberries need drainage, but they're actually native to places that have abundant water. And so it's one of those, you read those plant tags and it says evenly moist, and it's annoying to know what that means because, what's evenly moist mean, right? It is truly one of those plants that it can't be waterlogged, but yet it needs consistent water to do well. And so you can't put it in waterlogged clay. And if you're in that situation, you might consider a raised bed or something like that to kind of help out your drainage.
Yeah, and it sounds like you'd really want your blueberries separate from other plants in your garden. Do blueberries, like, can you have one blueberry bush by itself, or do they like to have buddies with them?
Yeah, it's probably better to have a few different kinds. There are some conflicting reports of some cultivars can or cannot pollinate themselves, and so it's always good to have a few just for just ensure pollination, because there are some that can self pollinate, there are some that cannot, and I don't honestly have a good list of those. So just you're gonna want to spread out the harvest anyway. So it's always good to have a few, but they can be next to other fruits as well. The challenge with that though is, let's say you have an apple tree and you're doing pest management in June. That's right before you're going to be harvesting these blueberries, and so it makes it a little tricky. If you're doing, you know, insect control with insecticides on an apple tree right next to your blueberries, you obviously don't want to get that on your blueberries when you're near harvest. And so it actually might make sense to kind of keep them away from tree fruits that might be harvested in the fall, so that you don't have those issues with trying to apply pest management products when you're also trying to pick blueberries.
I'm wondering, so let's say you've been successful with these blueberries. I know they're really good for you. Lots of different ways to eat them. I'm wondering, Randall, what your favorite way to eat blueberries and the best way to store them.
Yeah, I just like them plain. I'm not gonna lie. I don't want to put them in pancakes. I know you said that on the intro to this, but if I have a high quality blueberry, I don't want it cooked. I want to just eat it fresh. And what I really love about blueberries is when you grab a handful of them, there's a mix of tart and sweet ones in there, and so you get, every one has a slightly unique flavor to it, which I personally like. I know not everyone does like that.
I agree.
I just like them plain.
Thank you, Randall. I also like a tart blueberry. That's Iowa State University Extension Fruit Crops Specialist Randall Vos. For more gardening information and tips, please subscribe to our Garden Variety newsletter. Find out more at iowapublicradio.org/garden. I'm Meghan McKinney, in for Charity Nebby.
Garden Variety is a production of Iowa Public Radio and Iowa State University Extension. It's produced by me, Erin Stile, Caitlin Troutman, and the Iowa Public Radio talk show team. For more garden goodness, please subscribe to our Garden Variety newsletter. Just go to iowapublicradio.org/garden. I'm Charity Nebby. See you next time.